The Sassy Show is thrilled to partner with Joy Club as our sponsor for this series. Now, Joy Club is an online sex-positive community bringing curious, kinky minds together to connect, learn and play. If you're looking to spice up your social scene or host a sultry event, then Joy Club is a brilliant way of making an impact. But it's not just all about events, honeys. It's also a brilliant way to connect with like-minded individuals who share your passions and maybe even your deepest, wildest fantasies. So whether you want to explore those desires, make meaningful connections, or showcase that uncensored sass, Joy Club has created a safe and welcoming environment for you to do just that. So dive into the world of Joy Club by visiting joyclub.com and let the fun begin. We're rolling, honeys. It is the Sassy Show. I'm Bethany, and today I'm with a beautiful human. It's Frayed Knots. Hey, honey.
Hi, how are you guys?
Thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
I'm very excited, personally, because I've seen you about on the scene in London, looking all pretty.
Aww.
And then the other day, you offered to tie me.
That was a fun little tie.
That was a fun little tie.
You got to hang around. I always make that joke, but yeah.
And it's forever funny. We have a pun master over here as well.
One tries.
The pressure's on, make it pun.
Yeah, now you ask for one, it's like, good gosh.
We are here because I am being nosy and I want to know about your kinky journey.
Okay.
But do you think you could introduce yourself to our audience and tell them in your own words what it is that you like to get up to?
Sure. So I go by Frayed Knots online on most platforms. I started my kink journey, shall we call it? I lose track because of COVID, right? It feels like a black hole. But I feel like I started 1 or 2 years before then, in seriousness. Like I've had a few little incidents, with past partners back when I was monogamous and very straight and very, like on the go. Yes. But then I think it got more serious before COVID. I think I had, this is a long story, but...
We've got all night, haven't we?
Fair enough. So I used to have a very good friend from high school. And we'd gone our separate ways because we went to high school in India. I went to the UK. She went to the US. Many years later, she said, I'm visiting London. Let's catch up. So I said, all right, come over. We'll get some Chinese, watch some movies.
Cute.
Ended up hooking up because apparently this is what you do with long-lost friends.
That's sweet.
We started chatting a little bit, realized we had a very strong shared interest in kinky things, especially like bondage and stuff like that. So we started experimenting a little bit between ourselves, And I can't remember if it was myself or her who found Anatomy Studio, which is quite the big shibari spot in London. Okay, we should go and check that out. So we bottled up our courage, one fine Tuesday, signed up for a little beginner's rope jam.
Cute.
Got off the train at Peckham. It's down this long, dark alleyway, which now seems very familiar. But back then, it's like, good gosh, what are we getting into,
And I always get lost when I go there anyway.
Yeah. Is it number 23 or 21?
Who knows?
We walked past the front door, I think, 4 or 5 times, trying to pluck up the courage to be like, hey, is this the place where we tie people? And the only reason we actually went in is because somebody saw us and held the door open.
Okay.
So it's a bit of a sliding doors moment, what would have happened otherwise?
Yeah, you may never have got to this point.
Yeah, exactly, And we just kept coming back. Well, mainly myself, she had to move back to the US, but I just carried on from there. And then rope was very much like my gateway, to all of the other stuff. Met some really interesting people who were into all kinds of other nonsense. And just went from there.
Okay. What was it that really hooked you? Was it the process of doing something that was sensual? Was it something around the art of the rope?
Well, it's interesting because I think when I started the journeys again, so to speak, I found rope very hot and very sexy and very, okay, this is like really cool stuff. But the more I've done rope, the more it's kind of more for me where now it's not such a sexual thing. I find it more interesting from, I don't want to say artistic because if we're being honest, a lot of rope is a little bit tied by numbers because we learn the same things from different people. We have the same processes.
Okay.
But I really like the aesthetic of it. You can't just invent a tie and assume it's going to be safe. You have to have a lot, 10, 20 years of experience to be able to get to that level. But for me, rope has become much more about the aesthetic of it. And, I really enjoy getting into the really technical side of tying. And it's not so much like a play thing anymore. I think probably I would say 90% of the people I tie with purely platonic relationships. And it's just because we have an image in our mind we want to create.
Okay.
I still incorporate it sometimes in play, But I think that's not so much for me. It's more like, like a lot of people obviously like being tied up is very like interesting experience, and it can be like quite a lot of fun in a scene. And I enjoy being tied up in that context as well.
I was going to say, because you switch between the two.
So I don't want to be hypocritical about this. I'm very clear. Like, it's still like a very hot thing, but for me that's secondary. For me, it's mainly about trying to create something which I want. Like, like I've got this vision in my head of, oh, I want to do like this whole huge web, and I want to do it for like, I don't know, Halloween or something, because I think it'll be funny. Most of my motivation for things is I think it'll be funny. And so I'll find somebody who's like up for that. I'll be like, I have this idea. It may or may not work.
I'm seeing them like positioned as a spider in this web, looking at it like, but tied.
Most of my ideas start with like, hey, I saw this thing and I thought we could do something. Do you want to do it? And go from there.
It's interesting you talk about that process of learning. Did you find it accessible in all of the kinky things that you're into, and that maybe continue to explore in your mind? Like, you've gone from rope into other areas. How easy was it for you to learn what to do?
I mean, I think as kinks go, rope probably has one of the best, not communities, but best resources. Just because you have so many places you can go. And also because at its very base, it's not that sexual. I think people feel more comfortable tying with people in a more platonic manner. Like if you're teaching somebody some knots, there's less engagement and being like, okay, now we're going to learn some really hardcore anal stuff, for example, right? Like that's more theory. That's more something you read about or you watch a video, but not something which somebody will necessarily want to do like hands-on demonstration with you. So in that way, it's a little bit more accessible, I think.
But it would be helpful if someone gave you hands-on demonstrations for anal.
Yeah, right.
A bit of pegging tutorial, all the ins and outs. Yes, please.
Yeah, because I mean, it's one thing seeing and reading about stuff, but experiencing it yourself is very different. And it doesn't always, like everyone's experiences and the way, especially with like hardcore kinks, a lot of it is mental, the way your brain processes these things. So your experience might be similar to some people, but it could also be totally different. Like rope, for example, I find when I tie somebody for the first time, especially if they've never been tied before, I don't really like to set expectations on what we're going to do. Because some people, like first time tying, they can go upside down for 5-6 minutes and they're completely fine. It's like putting on and taking off a t-shirt for them. Other people just putting on a rope harness without any suspension or anything, like they will start sweating, they'll get in their head. I have it sometimes as well. Like I've done a tie, I think a couple of months back with someone. I've done this tie before and they started doing it on me. They laid a couple of ropes around my shoulders. I was like, I'm feeling lightheaded now. And I'm not sure why. Because there's all kinds of things like from your circulation to what you ate that day. And also like sometimes you get a bit of an adrenaline spike and it will fuck with your head a bit. I think unless you're quite experienced tying with a certain person, you kind of have to manage your expectations tying someone the first time. We go to a lot of rope jams. And there's some people which I know have been tying for years, and then they'll do a tie which by their standards is fairly tame, and they'll just be like, I feel sick, because it's a bad day, and it is quite a strenuous activity.
So it's making me realise how much awareness goes into it. For anyone who's interested in shibari, it's not as easy as learning it all. Actually, you have to be really in tune with your body and being able to communicate, and also, from your perspective, read the other person to know if they're safe, if they're happy, if they're feeling good.
Yeah. I think like shibari is interesting because on the one hand, it's one of the less intense kinks in terms of like, it's not that hardcore. It's pretty, it's cool, but it's not something, it's almost, in some ways, it's almost mainstream now, Like I think like it's more accepted in that sense. But on the other hand, it's one of the more dangerous kinks. Just because when you get into like nerve damage, blood circulation, the effect it can have on people, it can be quite dangerous. But at the same time, there's a weird juxtaposition where like 95% of your ties will be perfectly fine without incident, etc. But when things go wrong, they tend to go wrong quite quickly and quite badly. Like you can do a beautiful tie with somebody and then they come out and they're like, oh, my wrist is a bit funny, or I'm very cold or something. And
the wrist thing is quite a common experience, I've heard.
And it's probably one of the more common injuries, but I've personally not had it happen to myself or anyone I've tied yet. I've had a few issues with somebody where like the collarbone was a bit funny, like they had a bit of a, like, not a dead spot, but like, when your leg was not dead, like the feeling was gone for a few weeks. And that's probably because one of the ropes was on a nerve here.
Okay.
Nerve damage is cumulative. So once you injure it, it's more likely to get injured again.
Okay.
So it's why you always, before you tie someone, you have to ask them about their history a little bit, but there's all kinds of issues, like even chin splints will make your leg ties more, but
I'm giggling because when we tied, that was my I can't do it anymore moment because I had a rope against my little shin and it really hurt. Frayed Knots, when I look at your Instagram, you have worked with so many beautiful humans. You have a very particular style, I've seen. But I'm wondering what goes beneath the art. How has this changed your life?
I mean, when it started, it was a bit of a hobby, you know? And then I think when COVID happened, because we were all in lockdown and we were all bored out of our minds at home, and I just started practicing like daily. I mean, couldn't practice on people for a long time, so I had to commit minor fraud to get a dummy, which I could tie on. But that's a whole other story. At the moment, I don't tie as much as I used to. At one point, I think I was tying like 2 or 3 times a week. Like I was posting on Instagram every 2 days. Like I had my whole social media strategy, you know, like if we post once every 48 hours, the algorithm is going to push us up. Blah, blah, blah.
Did it work?
It kind of did. But then I kind of just, there was a certain point, again, like going back to the creativity side of it. There was a certain point in my rope journey where I kind of done most of the stuff I wanted to do. And I kind of got to the point where I could like see a photo of somebody else had tied and be like, I could, even if I haven't tied that, I can see exactly how it works. And I can tie that as well, you know? And it kind of got to the point where I got a bit of like almost writer's block or tying block, if you will. And I was a bit like, I don't know what else to tie at this point. So I took a bit of an extended, not rope break, but like I just stopped doing it as regularly. And now I still tie, I would say like maybe once every couple of weeks or something like that. And my rope is still pretty good, if I say so myself, but it's not at the level I was a couple of years ago, I don't think. So I'm now kind of recapturing my love for it and trying to get back into it.
But is it because you're feeling like it's an achievement, like that art that you're creating? Because the more you talk about it, the more it feels like it's a activity and a skill that you've harnessed.
Good one. That really tied it up together.
Hey!
I think like the partners I'm dating now, for instance, are not as much into rope as people have maybe dated in the past. Or friends which I used to tie with more regularly have moved on. Like there was one person I tied with like almost once a week and they've moved to Berlin. You know, there's somebody else I used to tie with and now they've started their own little fashion brand and we haven't really had time to tie in years now. But now it's like more like, I think it's more about making it more like sensual and trying to recapture a bit of a play element in it. So there's like a lot of riggers will teach us to tie with intent, you know, and it's getting very much into the people's personal space. Obviously, like, you know, this is pre-negotiated, etc. But it's making things a very sensual experience, not just in the way you're tying, but also the way you're untying. And it's almost like tantric in certain aspects. For me, I'm very like socially awkward in certain senses, and I'm not a very tactile, astute person with a lot of people. So I think I tie with a little bit more distance than most riggers would do. You know, like for me, I'm more focused on the knots and checking in with a person, making it quite casual, having a conversation while we're doing it, rather than it being like, okay, like this is like a scene, you know? So I'm trying to work a bit more on that element, but that has meant that I'm more picky about the people I will tie with in that sense, because I feel that I need to have a more personal connection with somebody to get into that kind of space and a level of comfort to do that. So I think in that sense, I'm getting a bit more back into rope. I'm still doing my aesthetic stuff, but, you know, because every now and then I'll have an idea like, oh, I really want to do this, or I really want to do this thing in the woods, or I found a really cool space I want to tie in. But in that sense, it's changed. But like rope has definitely like helped change a lot of my life, because one, it's made me be able to like access the kink community a lot more. I think as a guy, you know, like when you start off in kink, when you don't know people, you don't know the events, it can be quite difficult to get in. Like I'm pretty sure there's a lot of clubs which, you know, you need membership or to be vouched for, and I've got in purely because I was a rigger and I had a kinky profile, which a lot of people wouldn't have, you know, so that's a bit of privilege on my side, I guess, but also I had to work to get those skills, you know. But I think like now it went from a bit of a hobby to like it's half my life, you know, like half the stuff I go to like the festivals, I go to especially for like screenings of stuff. It's because it's kinky, you know, and I want to know, like, I've recently moved back to France temporarily and I'm trying to find the kink scene there, because I'm like, there has to be something, you know, but like I can't decide if the French scene is so underground that I can't find it, or if it's non-existent or just really bad.
We gotta sniff it out, honey. It's gonna be there. It's always there.
Yeah, but I feel like it's not as organized as London, where you've got like KB, Riot, Joyride, and all these really cool places which are very, you know, upfront with advertising and finding new people to coming and being welcoming. Whereas France, well, I don't know. I mean, so I'm purely speculating here, but I haven't really found that level of access or for those events. I think they're more private, and even like the shibari spaces there, not quite like London. Like there are shibari studios, which I need to check out before I can really voice an opinion on them. But just like first impressions I've seen, it's not just quite as welcoming as, hey, we have a Tuesday thing, anyone can come. And we have your rope, you can try stuff out, we've got lessons, etc. You know, it's not quite that level of just be brave and sign up. You have to jump through a few more hoops, I think.
I also really value what you just mentioned of being able to move through certain scenes as a cis man.
Yeah.
Because I think from my perspective as someone who's safeguarding, you're looking out for everyone, right? But there is a level of speculation when it comes to a single man who's coming to a party. Do you feel like it's helped you in those spaces to embrace another side of yourself? Or were you always all of you?
I mean, I think like when I started on the scene, I would probably describe myself as very cis, very straight, top-leaning, etc. And I think the other stuff was all there, but it was more like one admitting it to other people and one admitting it to yourself, because, you know, I come from like India, which is, well, I come from a hippie commune in India, so I have this weird background which is both very liberal and very conservative at the same time, and it's a whole mess. But basically, like, I think getting more comfortable in the scene, meeting people who are more open about their sexuality, about, you know, what their interests are, it kind of made me realize that it's not that big a deal, you know, at least in this space. And it's so much more welcoming, and people will talk to you about these things and they won't judge you, etc. So that has been like definitely helped me like evolve my life, and it's also helped me meet more people with shared interests and make it just makes my life feel a lot more wholesome. Being able to talk about these things, not having repressed feelings. On the scene itself, like I safeguard as well a little bit, but it's seeing people, you know, like cis men, like you mentioned, coming to these events for the first time, and, you know, their eyes are like that because they, you know, they've never seen anything like this before, but it also makes people very uncomfortable. And then you kind of have to decide, like, okay, do you ask them to leave, or do you just have a quiet word and be like, hey, dude, I know this is like a whole new world for you, but just be aware of how you're coming across, you know?
Yeah, the starers. We're talking about the starers. Because I think you can become desensitized quite quickly to things within kink. In the parties, you're a performer, so sometimes when we see performances, we're like, whoa, you've seen it once, and then you're like, oh, okay, now it's more comfy. But I think sometimes that stepping stone is quite a mess or blurry.
Yeah, and I think there's also a cultural element to it. Like, I think, for instance, I'm half French, and the French stare. You know, it's just what we do. So, but that will make people, that not just in a kink setting, like you go in France and you do something strange, people will point, like, look at what they're doing, you know, they're not shy about it. Like certain cultures are just, it's not as seen as bad. Like in London, if you do anything in the tube, everyone will just look at their phone, you know, like no one will do anything because it's just kind of a cultural thing. And I think it's a little bit the same in the scene. Like you see certain people and they don't realize that them staring is making other people uncomfortable. You have to make them aware. Obviously, there are some people which they don't care if they're making people uncomfortable, and you have to kind of separate that and be like, okay, you're not going to be a right fit for the space. But you don't know that until you talk to them. And like I said, like can be quite overwhelming coming into a space like this when you have no idea what you're getting into, you're not expecting it. And I mean, the outfits are amazing, they are eye-catching. But it's learning how to navigate that can be quite tricky. And I do think I don't want to cry about like cis men and their challenges because there's so many other benefits.
But you can,
but it's still like issues which I think I don't think that sometimes I feel like they don't have the people to help them these things and help them self-improve. Again, it's labor, which everyone should be doing for themselves, but you kind of have to nudge them, like. Yeah,
because the only reason I think I'm able to have an opinion that I have and know how to navigate spaces is because of friends and people who've advised me. And we all go through big learning curves. So it's like, oh shit, like I'm not allowed to grab your ass, my bad. Like that is a big one for me. The consent of grabbing an ass, yes.
Yeah, or even taking pictures. Like if you go in most places, most friends groups, it's very normal to take a photo without asking people like, oh, you look funny in here, I'm doing a snap a photo and put it on my social media because it's funny, lol. In the scene, if you post a photo of somebody without asking them, like you're instantly in hot water and for good reason. But it's explaining that to somebody, like something which they've done every day their whole life. Suddenly this place we've created isn't okay anymore, and explaining to them the reasoning, and once they understand it, most of the time I find people get on board quite quickly. But very often they don't even realize they've done something wrong. But again, it comes down to labor, you know, like at the end of the day, you're doing you're helping somebody grow, but you're putting in the labor to help them grow. So I'm very conscious that when I started on the scene, I was very lucky to meet certain people who I could like talk to and have very candid conversations to kind of help guide me. And, you know, that was work for them. And I'm grateful for that because we're still very good friends in the most cases, but it is an investment you're putting into somebody as well, right?
Yeah. And sometimes it can backfire. Like I've put in a lot of effort with people. I've taken them to a party and I'm like, you're acting like an asshole still. Enough, you know?
Yeah.
But I think you want people to go on this journey. You want them to be able to explore their fantasies. And yeah, I feel like everyone should have a chance. But talking of this sort of advice and getting people's advice for yourself, what advice would you give to your younger self or to the sassy crew?
I mean, I'm always wary of advice for these things because I find like a lot of advice, you listening to it, sometimes it'll make sense, but you won't really sink in until you've lived it yourself, you know? It's like a lot of the best advice always makes the most sense in hindsight. And for me, like the best piece of advice I give my old self would be like, don't try and fit in so much. You know, like if you find a group of people, not like even in the kinks, not just kinky people in general, but within the kink scene, there's different cliques, there's different groups of people who do things differently.
In fact, I think we're part of different cliques.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're very contrasting with the colors, yeah, aren't we?
Yeah.
But I think it's like, you know, you will find your people eventually. Just because you found a kinky group of people doesn't mean you have to try and fit in with them. Because at the end of the day, they might be nice people, you might be a nice person, but sometimes it's just not that compatible. But you know, there's so many people on the scene now. People come with all kinds of different attitudes, different ways of doing things, from the way they structure their relationships, to the way they negotiate scenes, etc. And I mean, there are obviously some ways they're always like the main pillars for building a scene with somebody, but I think like the details can vary depending on how your outlook is, you know, and what kind of stuff you're doing as well. Like if you're doing some really active CNC stuff, then I think that needs to be negotiated to a higher level than if you're just doing some like impact play, for instance. Not that shouldn't be negotiated either, but it's a different level of negotiation.
Yeah.
And I think different groups of people will do things differently, and it's finding those people and doing things the way you're comfortable with. Like you don't have to always try and fit in with everything. Like take advice, take it on, but think for yourself.
Yeah.
And if things don't work for you, you know, find people who have a similar outlook to you and you can work with.
Yeah, I love that because I think it probably took me a good 18 months to meet people who I really liked hanging out with at parties, which is quite a long time, actually.
I mean, I think it takes years to fit into the scene properly. Even once you get membership to like the KVs of this world, etc. Like I see so many people who are wandering around KV by themselves, you know, just trying to make friends, and it takes a while. But what I would say is once you've made the steps, like if you follow through and you put in the effort, learn some skills, make the effort to meet people and be nice, eventually you'll make friends and, you know, it'll change your life. Like you meet so many interesting people on the scene. And even if you don't necessarily share their kinks or like all of their interests, like just having people who are into stuff which you're not into can really expand your horizons and really expand your mind into like what you can get up to.
Right, the possibilities are endless.
It's like, I'm not into this, but I respect it, you know?
Yeah, like good for you. One of my big things is the sassiness that I feel these spaces allow to come out and play. What does your sassy side look like, honey?
Oh, my sassy side is normally when I brat, I think. Like, I have an unfortunate track record of getting tops to safe word. Which isn't a good thing. I should very much stress. But
yeah, I'm trying to work out how that happens.
Well, I always ask, like, you know, are you comfortable with bratting? To what level? And if somebody says, do your worst, it's not going to end well.
Okay.
No, but I mean, like I said, I normally play with people I know quite well, so we work through it. But I've had times like somebody was tying me once, and they were not that good at tie. I mean, they're decent, but you know, and they were tying me, and I was bratting, so I was making fun of their ropes, and I was saying, "Oh, you've gone for that, not there. That tension seems off." Da 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 da. You know.
I just fill your mouth with rope.
Yeah. No, they tried to like tighten a knot to like knock the wind out of me, and they said, "Is that tight enough for you?" So I didn't have any breath to say anything back, so I spat in their face.
Oh, you're such a bad brat!
I know.
Oh my gosh, that's giving me ideas, honey.
And they weren't expecting it, and it kind of like, you know, some people like really have to get into their role, And when you break the immersion, it like kind of kills the scene.
Yeah, no
shit. So that ended that scene, unfortunately, which I really regret because it was a fun scene. But sometimes you fuck around, everyone finds out.
I think I'd just be like, lick it off.
Yeah. But hindsight is 2020. It's coming up with I should have done that.
It can just catch you off guard. You're like,
no, but I mean, like, I think that one thing which we need to do more in the scene, I think, is we need to be talking more about like when scenes didn't work out, mistakes people have made. I think people worry a lot about being cancelled on the scene, etc. But we all make mistakes, like especially when we do quite hardcore things. We're always pushing limits, and I think like it's sometimes you do stuff with somebody and it will go wrong. Like as a rigger, for example, I always say my job is to minimize the risks as much as possible, but I can never eliminate them entirely. Like if you tie 100 people and you have like 99% chance of keeping it safe, there's always a 1% where you're going to have an incident, and it's how you handle it. Not just in terms of the scene itself, but it's not like even the injured part. Like I've got injuries and stuff which went too far when I was subbing. And I've kind of had a conversation, be like, hey, that thing we tried, not so much for me. But, I went into it fully aware of the risks, etc. But the scene can still go wrong. It can be a bit tricky. I don't find people like to talk about these things so much because I think people worry a lot about the reputation of the scene because the reputation is so important,
Yeah, and I actually think that's very nuanced. Like you might have a dodgy experience with one person and someone else will have a brilliant experience with them. And so it's like recognizing the individual in each case and trying to humanize it, I guess.
No, especially when you start on the scene as well, you're going to blunder a lot. Like when I started on the rope scene and I wanted to try getting tied up, I was very enthusiastic about approaching people I didn't know, be like, hey, can we tie? I'm being a bit of a pest. And now on the other end of that, where I get DMs from random people I've never met being like, hey, can we tie? And I'm like, ooh, no. But, I was on the other end of that and I know what it feels like. But it's like, like kink, like the rest of your life, is about growth. It's recognizing when you've done things which weren't completely correct or, with the best of intentions. Sometimes I think when you're new to the scene, you really want to experience everything and you want to reach out to people. But when you've been on the scene in a while, you've done a lot of things and you don't really want to play with people which don't have your level of experience because it's a bit like, yeah, exactly. But it's kind of finding people who are not just into your stuff, but in the same level of experience or who are willing to teach you to get to their level is highly challenging. That's why I was saying, like, don't try to fit, like, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like, these things will take a lot of time to develop. And, it like with everything else, it takes work.
Yeah, I always got told from the person who taught me the most at the start, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I have to remember that all the time.
As someone who runs marathons, I can tell you they hurt, but they're worth it.
It's worth it. Yeah. Triathlon, baby, over here.
We're into pain, aren't we?
That's true. The crossover between sport and kink. It's the quick fire round. Are you ready?
All right.
Quick.
I'm prepared, very confident. Let's go.
Are you? Well, that's good because the first question is, when do you feel most confident?
After a scene, always after the fact.
Always.
I always feel nervous, like before a performance, for instance, I'm like, I'm going to fuck up, this is going to go terribly. Afterwards, I'm like, yeah, that was easy.
Even whenever you're top or bottom?
I think I sub more easily than it's tricky. It really depends on what we're doing, to be honest. But I always feel most confident afterwards. Like if I've topped and I've done a good scene and the other person's turned into like a piece of jelly, I'm very happy with myself. I'm like, oh, I did that,
The jelly test. Do you wobble?
Yeah.
We did a good job.
But equally subbing, if I'm doing something quite challenging and I manage to do it, I'm like, yeah, that is pull that off,
Right. That's nice. What is one dream you wish to come true?
Just in general.
Yeah.
Kink specific.
Oh, now I want it to be kink specific. But I also want to hear 2 dreams, please.
All right, 2 dreams. One, I want us to tax the rich more.
Until you get rich, then you'll say the opposite.
Yeah. No, because I work in media and I just feel that too many people have private interests in media and it's the lobbying thing does my head in. And I think so many social issues come down to the fact that rich people have too much money and influence to push their own agendas and just muddy the waters in almost every single issue you can think of. And I think if we tax them more and put the media back in hands, like not the government, God forbid, but I think that it should be more like equal shares where like there's no one party who can set an agenda, then I think we would have much more healthy discourse about a huge number of things in society.
Wow, that's like a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah.
What's the kinky dream?
Right now I really want to get into fisting more.
Ooh. Okay, side question. Can you fist an asshole?
What, me personally?
No,
or in theory? Well, I mean, I've got long hands, so we need to find somebody.
Okay, well, bookmark that.
All right, we'll do another podcast on that too.
Yeah, with a demonstration. Tell me about a cause that's close to your heart or a law you want to change. We just talked about the tax, but maybe there's a different one.
I mean, I think we should decriminalize sex work in everywhere.
Yeah.
I think that's super important. I think today even they were having a debate in Parliament, not debate, but I think somebody put forward a bill that they want to outlaw websites where sex workers can advertise, because they were like, oh, it's the websites are taking a cut of the money and it's disempowering them. But it's actually okay, but like, where do you want them to go next? You know,
right.
Back to pimping? Like
literally, you're kicked off every social media network otherwise. So
yeah, but it comes back to media. Like I was saying, the problem with the media is that every social media platform you have, when it starts off, like an OnlyFans, OnlyFans used to be a lot more accepting of various contents. Now it's become quite vanilla, I think. And the reason is, as soon as you start small, you get all the content creators come on and be like, oh, this is a great space. We can do whatever we want. Then it starts expanding, and then once it starts expanding, it goes to the Middle East, other countries like China, India, etc., who all have their laws, and it always appeals to the lowest denominator. So if one big market says, oh, we can't have this, we can't have that, we can't have this other thing, then it kind of affects everyone, because then the rules start piling on and it becomes so much harder to moderate.
Wow. So there's like a ripple effect from other countries that are impacting ours?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, that's an oversimplification maybe, but there's a lot of effects. As soon as a social media channel grows to a certain size, it gets a lot more attention from regulators. And then once they get threatened regulators, like I think the US election, when Trump won the first time, and there was a huge, not even a debate, more of a witch hunt about, Facebook advertising, etc. And both sides of the debate got in on this. And basically they had hearings with social media companies about how they're moderating their ads, Russian interference, etc. Which I'm not saying didn't happen, but as always, whenever you have these things, who gets caught in the crossfire? It's the kink communities, sex workers, etc. Because immediately all these laws apply to them first, because they're an easy example to make, because no politician is going to stick his nose out and be like, I'm for the whores,
Not yet, still time.
Yeah, maybe. We need to get our own, right?
You could get into politics.
Oh, no, God, no. I don't have the temperament for it. I want change now, not in 6 months.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for spotlighting that. If you need to rewind and understand, do, because I will be. Name a key experience that has shaped you positively.
Okay, well, this one is a bad experience which shaped me positively. It was a kink scene I did with someone. And so I like fear play. And the thing with fear play is it's very difficult to negotiate. Because if I say to you, when we're preparing a scene, I'm going to do this, this, and this to you. Are you okay with this, this, and this? It'll still be a fun scene, but you kind of know what you're expecting, so you can mentally prepare. Whereas with fear play, you can't. If you can mentally prepare too much, it doesn't quite hit as hard.
Okay.
So we kind of establish, like the things you don't want to do rather than the things you want to do. But if you had something you didn't want to do, but you didn't think you wouldn't want to do it because you never knew it existed, that's one of the failures in that system, I suppose. But again, it's a risk-aware kink. But basically, I was doing a scene with somebody, and they ended up figging me without me realizing this was even a thing until that happened.
Wow.
In the moment, very surprising, very painful, very head-fucky.
Okay.
But I really trusted the person, and it was still fun. Purely because of the head fuck, because I wasn't expecting it, because I didn't know what it was. I was like, what the hell even is this? Why does this hurt so much? Why does it burns, But I think it really, like, that kind of scene helped me in the sense of, one, researching more stuff which I had never heard of, which is always interesting, a fun rabbit hole to go down. But also post-negotiating scenes with people, like reviewing things and be like, that was interesting. I'm not saying I would do it again. I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again either, because it's despite it being a little bit traumatic, it's one of the best headspaces I've had during a scene, which is really weird. But I think like a lot of kink is that kind of juxtaposition between one, feeling comfortable, but equally you want to be a little bit like,
edge,
and it's a very fine line to walk, and it's very tricky. And I think it's also why, like, I think like if you want to do kink, like it's not therapy. I think a lot of people like to revisit things and, have elements of their past trauma which resurface during kink, and that's normal. But equally, you have to be quite comfortable with yourself getting into these things, because otherwise it can be quite dangerous.
And I'm also thinking about the side effects it might have on the other person too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that was a beautiful one. Key positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot from it, and I don't regret it. At the time, probably, but in hindsight, I was like, it was a positive experience.
Yeah. It's the final question.
Okay.
Are you ready? What is the best thing about being you?
Best thing about being me, I think, is I just have my own opinions on things. Like, I think I just kind of try and do things my own way. Like, I take influences from other people, etc., but I don't want to, like, do things certain ways with other people just because other people have done it. I'm just a bit like, want to go my own way, do my own thing. I'll find my own people and, yeah, just be happy,
Cheers to that. Where's my tea? It's being happy.
Santé.
Santé! How do we say that in Indian? Hindi?
Hindi, I don't know. I'm Tamil.
Oh.
I have no idea either. I forgot all my Tamil, so that's a weird tangent. But
do you want to share your social media on screen?
Sure. So my main account is Frayed Knots. That's Frayed _knots_.
Yeah.
And that's all my rope stuff.
And it is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Very black and white and red.
Yes.
That's your favourite colour.
Got to build a brand. Got to stand out.
You already stand out.
Oh.
Beautiful. Thank you, Joanna. This episode is brought to you by our amazing sponsors, joyclub.com, an online sex-positive community bringing kinky, curious wonders together from all walks of life. Whether you're looking to spice up your social calendar with those hottest events, share your steamy thoughts and ideas in their lively forum, or set out for a search for that hot date, Joy Club is the ultimate destination to connect with those like-minded individuals. Creating your profile is easy, and it is the perfect way to showcase your unique vibe. Share those sassy photos and explore topics that excite you, and dive into the welcoming community where learning, exploring, and pleasure is encouraged. So if you're ready to bring a little extra excitement and joy into your world, head over to joyclub.com and join the community today.